Bob Ormsby,
Here.
Jeremy Preble, and Sarah Ritchie.
Courtney, I know both Al and Jeremy are on the call. Just wanted to make sure that we caught that. I did not hear them out. Next item up is the approval of the agenda. I'd like to, Charlie, is this where I can ask if we shovel things a little bit here?
Yep.
We're going to ask to move item 7A down in the order a little bit. We have a few housekeeping items with some people not being able to vote on this one. So I'd like to move that down to the end just to make sure that we're safe so that we have the right people on for that. Unless anybody is opposed to that, we'll move 7A basically down to that 7E slot. Okay, if there's no objections to that, take a motion to approve the agenda with that one change. I don't hear anybody. Our speaker's working.
Everybody's on mute.
I'll make a motion, Bob.
First, we have a second.
Joe, second.
Joe, second. Thank you, guys. All right, all those in favor of approve the agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Same sign. Perfect. Moving along to item number 4, the approval of the June 9th, 2020 minutes. Does anybody have any comments or questions about those minutes? Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve those.
Jeremy Preble will make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Jeremy, second.
Joe, second.
Joe Butler, second. All those in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, we are open here in chambers tonight. Is there anybody for public comment in general? I spoke to you folks earlier. You'll be speaking later. I don't see anybody else. Charlie, we don't have the phone lines open, correct? All right. There is no old business. So we will move right along to the new agenda item, which was now 7A. Consider recommendation on request for approval of a plat of survey for Redeemer Lutheran Church located at 1410 West Boston Avenue.
Yeah, Redeemer Lutheran Church is proposing essentially to split off the parsonage off from the church parcel. So currently it's a parcel that is a little over, hold on one second, 3.12 acre parcel. It includes about a 10,000 square foot church and about a 1,500 square foot single family home that is used as a parsonage for the church. Again, Redeemer Lutheran is proposing to split off the single family dwelling and sell that. We did note that the comprehensive plan does call for this land as public / semi-public. However, that designation is placed on that because the entire property is owned by the church. We did note that the surrounding area on all the north, east, and west sides are shown in the comp plan as low density residential, which this parcel would comply with if it was split off and sold as a single family. This is not proposing any new development, no new public improvements or anything like that. So all aspects of our ordinance have been met with this, and recommend alternative 1 approving the plat of survey as. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Charlie, this is Bob. If this is then going to an R1 or 2, then that plot?
So no, we're talking the comp plan designation. The zoning district on there, I believe, was on the staff report back up here. I didn't have it on there. I apologize for that. I believe it was either R1 or R2, but just give me 1 second here and I'll double check that.
Does that require then the church property have to put up a screen between the properties?
Nope, it would not. No. Just as a plat of survey, it wouldn't, since they are existing.
Even though it's going to be under new ownership, yeah. Probably sold, does it not have to comply with screening requirements being a
There's no site plan that's being submitted with this, and since it's just being done as a plat of survey, it does not need to follow that requirement.
Confirming that, Charlie.
I'm trying to get the zoning district.
Well, Charlie's looking at that zoning district. Does anybody have any other questions on this one? Okay. We'll just wait for Charlie here for a sec.
Yeah, the zoning district is R1 residential. So yeah, and then even on that too, what we do when we look at buffers that are required, it's typically zoning district to zoning district, not use to use. So since the entire parcel is zoned R1, there would be no buffer. Now with the parcel, if the church itself was zoned commercial or industrial, typically commercial, you know, that would kick in definitely with the zoning district boundary. But since it is all R1, there is no requirement for the buffer.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else have questions for Charlie? All right, folks, are you here to make public comment on this one?
Yes.
If you'd like to, you can step forward to the microphone here and state your name and your address, please. Oh, if you don't mind, wait till you get to the microphone here. We want to make sure we record it for posterity.
I live at 1305 West Clinton, here in Indianola.
What was your
And-
name, ma'am?
Our house is behind the Lutheran church,
Okay,
and this involves all of us that live along there changing these lines on the property.
Okay.
And this is why we're here. The line what we on our letter, it shows the boundary is going to be running right along an easement that is a large sewer. And it's right along a drainage ditch that runs right behind our house and all the other houses. I know some of our other neighbors that live behind that have gotten this letter in regards to this. And the church has also built down there behind us a drainage pond. And when they did that, they dug the ditch for the drainage to come out of the pond into the ditch behind us. They've washed out our stake of where our property line is. Now, it's not changing our property line because we're at an angle, but everyone else is going to be changed when they do this. Plus, that pond, if they divide those from the parsonage and the church property, that's going to be right in the middle of that drainage pond.
sure.
We had an issue this year that pond filled full of water and it never drained. We had 3 teenagers go swimming in there. I had to call the church and let them know. They did come and got it fixed to where it's not draining, but we haven't had any rain.
Sure.
So
Now, to your one question there, I'm not aware of how this would change property lines at all. Charlie, would you mind sharing on this a little bit?
Yeah, on those property lines there along Clinton, it's not changing the property lines of any of those. The church can't change those property
Well,
lines.
it will, because the church property original comes over across that ditch and affects our neighbor more than it does us.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't see why they're doing that.
Yeah, so the church is just splitting off existing property that they own. They're not splitting any other properties along Clinton there. So their property line, it shows that square right there. Their property line actually goes beyond the limits of the creek
Yes,
onto
it
the north
does,
side there.
between our house and our neighbor's house.
Yeah.
And then also there's another jag of that onto another property that's on the other side of the parsonage.
But they're just splitting property that they own. They're not splitting any property
No,
that they don't
I
own.
understand that.
Okay,
But you're
okay. I just want to
changing,
make sure we're clear on that.
changing each person's house where their lines are.
I don't think that they are. Actually, I know that they're not. Again, like
Well,
Charlie said,
I tell
they
you what,
have a rectangle that they own already, and they're just adding a bisecting line in that
I can show
rectangle.
you this where their property lines are.
You're welcome to come up here. We can certainly take a peek. If it requires somebody smart, I'm gonna have you show it to Charlie, but I'll take a stab to start. Absolutely.
See this is our house right here.
Yes, ma'am.
And then this is our neighbor lady. And see here, the property comes way over here and behind Jennifer's.
Right here, just like on this map. This is what they're actually doing. So there's that same jag right there. So all they're doing is reconfirming those lines, which are right here. And then they're adding a bisecting line, excuse my math, 1, 2, that's probably be like right about here. and
No,
create a new
I
part.
know,
So this won't affect or change anything that's existing. These lines stay the same, the exact same as they were.
okay,
The only new line that's being added is this. Otherwise, everything else is the exact same. We're just drawing an imaginary line.
well, the thing is, that line isn't there. It's over here.
And I'm
Because this is the back of our house
sure,
in this corner.
sure.
And right there is where they put the state surveyor did.
Well, and that's one that you might, Charlie, what they're gonna record here is there's 120 feet from this corner to here will be 120 feet, and it'll go down. And at that point, that's where that property line will be.
For
And
the
so,
parsonage.
yep, and I'm
Oh, okay, well, because this is what. See, this here,
Mhm.
there's an easement in between there too.
sure. And that those easements will still exist.
I think that's electrical.
But so this will go 120 feet from this corner, according to this, 120.2 feet. Line will go straight up to here, so probably right in here somewhere would be my guess, just
Okay.
eyeballing it.
Let's see, right over here, there's a jag.
Not according to what we have here. That's one that's more of a Charlie thing.
Yeah, I mean, their surveyor surveyed it, so when their surveyor goes up,
Surveyors, I mean, they didn't even know where to start. A year and a half ago, there was 2 of them down there, and he had to show them where everything was. And the church.
Sure. Well, I know it's probably not the most clear, at least from what I'm sharing, but all I can share is what they're submitting to us that's been verified by the surveyors.
and
which
their
are-
licensed surveyor has verified the property lines, so.
They're not creating anything new. They're just adding that one line.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Sir, there's still a chance for you to say something if you'd like. She did a great job. It's a tough act to follow, though. Okay.
Thank you.
I hope you guys heard most of that, just kind of clarifying some of those lines on our map. So is there any other questions for Charlie? All right. If there's no more discussion, I would entertain a motion on this.
This is Becky. I move to approve, the City of Indianola Planning and Zoning Commission recommends that the plat survey request be approved as submitted.
Becky, do we have a second?
Pribble, I will second.
Jeremy, thank you. There's no further discussion. We're gonna move to a roll call real quick. Courtney, Misty might not be on for this one, so if you don't hear, that would be that. But if you wouldn't mind taking a roll call, that'd be great.
Joe Butler,
Yes.
Al Ferris,
Yes.
Reber,
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
Karen,
yes. Becky Needles,
Yes.
Bob Ormsby,
Yes.
Jeremy Preble,
Yes.
Josh Ray,
Yes.
and Misty Stoltz.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Moving along. Thank you, folks. If you have more questions too, Charlie's office phone rings all the time, and he can happily walk you through some more questions if you guys have those. Next item on the agenda is to consider recommendation on request for alternative method of approval for a site plan for Crow's Nest RV Park located at 100 and 300 West 17th Avenue. Charlie?
Yeah, so Crow's Nest RV Park, you'll recall we did a rezoning for this the last couple meetings ago, plus we worked on this last fall. They have submitted a site plan approval. They are proposing a campground that will host 148 RV spots and 9 cabins that will be available to the general public. As part of this process, they are proposing, rather than paving the interior of the RV park and the RV parking pads, rather than paving those, that they will do those as gravel spots. The justification is that 17th Street, where they will be taking access from, is currently a gravel road. So to keep in with the existing conditions that are out there, they are continuing that and requesting that this RV park be gravel. We are currently working through them on all the other aspects of the site plan. We're wrapping up a second round of comments that we can return to them here hopefully by the end of this week, and get through that process. But this is just one of the comments, and a few comments that we had on that was regarding the parking surface and the need to get an alternative approval through the Planning and Zoning Commission. So with that, if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Charlie, before we get going here too much, there's, I think, 2 folks here on this one to answer questions, or just, I see Stacy Crow.
Yeah, Stacy Crow and Ed Arp are Ed Arp is the property owner's consultant on this, and then Stacy Crow is the property owner, but they are both available for questions if there are any.
Let me get there. Does anybody have any questions for Charlie to kick us off here?
Charlie, this is Joe. In the engineer's letter, it talks about when the road gets paved, having a phased approach to paving it. So I think it says over a period of time. Can you talk through the enforcement and how that would work? Would there have to be a bond in place, or what would that look like to make sure that that does happen over that time frame?
So as part of this process, I think the Planning and Zoning Commission does have the ability to put conditions on that. As you had mentioned, then how do you implement those conditions and how does that get done? We are working with them on a possible development agreement for a trail that would go through there. So the Indianola Trail Plan, the Trail Master Plan, does show a trail going from this area, 17th Street, up to the north, that would connect with South Park and then eventually up to the square. Kind of some of the discussion that we've had now with the applicant on that is that they're not exactly sure the exact location of that trail, so it's really hard to pinpoint an exact easement location on that. So we are looking at possibly getting into a development agreement with them. Essentially, the development agreement would lay out a few things, but would say at the point that the city is ready to install this trail, property owner then has to give an easement for said trail, and then whatever parameters on that agreement and that easement would also be put in that development agreement. So as part of that, if there is a inclination from the Planning and Zoning Commission to put a condition on there as far as paving, once 17th Street is paved, whenever that may be, if that ever does happen, we could probably include that in a development agreement.
So Charlie, how does the enforcement of the developers agreement happen then? I mean,
yeah, it's a legally binding agreement at that point. So however we put in the parameters on that, if it's a notification to them that says, okay, at this point you have to pave, and if it doesn't get paved at that point, I mean, that's where legal action would have to come in to make sure that happened. Yeah, we could do bonding as part of the agreement, but yeah, I'd have to look into that just a little bit, but who knows how long, again, that'll be before we get to a point where we're paving it, and how long we're holding on to a bond and how long the bonds last for. So I would think that possibly the development agreement would have a little bit more teeth, just knowing that if we ever do run into issues that, you know, we could be looking at legal ramifications and cost on making sure that the paving does happen.
Anybody else have any questions here? Charlie, I'm just curious as we talk about this. I mean, are there?
Stacy,
Oh.
it looks like she's trying to talk,
Sure.
but she's on mute.
Yep, Stacy, you're on mute. I'm going to say one thing to Charlie and then I'll switch it over to you. Does that sound good? Charlie, I just wanted to think about, you know, if as we adjust things to let a nice RV park in here and all that, what are the ramifications of having it be gravelled? Is it going to have that same appeal to people? I mean, is that kind of that balance of what we're supposed to look out for as well?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, most RV parks, and we've had the discussion with the applicant, is most RV parks tend to be more rural in nature and kind of located outside of city limits. There are a few examples of RV parks that are located within city limits. I don't know if those RV parks are gravel or hard surface or whatever they are, but typically RV parks tend to be more rural in nature, and that leads to more gravel surfaces than does paved surfaces. So
comfortable with the engineering that's not going to make it a muddy mess?
Yeah, so we worked with them on that. The concern initially was, we know that our gravel roads are maintained to a certain standard, to where you're not going to have mud ruts and all of that stuff. What we can't guarantee on a private piece of property is that the maintenance of those take place. So we worked with them to put I think it's 50-foot 50-foot paved apron from the road into their property. So any RVs might have mud that gets caught in the axles or anything like that, that it would presumably fall off on that gravel or on that paved apron before it hits the gravel road. So I think we've mitigated that concern through that process, and that was one of our public work director's comments on that as well too, that if we were going to allow the gravel, that would be something we'd want to do.
Sure. Stacy, did you want to pipe in here and share something? You have to hit unmute on your speaker there real quick. There should be.
Yep, there we go. Okay. So I don't have a problem at some point when you get 17 paved, hopefully by then we'll have enough money and, we can pave the whole, main roads into the park. But I kind of wanted to go green at first because it is such a big project. And I wanted to, make sure that we were going to get the people in there that we were supposed to get, that people want to camp in that area. So, and then the bike path, I guess I'm not sure, Charlie, how, so if I don't give you an agreement for the bike path, then you will make me pave it? Or I guess I'm not understanding that.
No, so we were, and that's not really part of this discussion, but I'll go over it real quick. The discussion that we've been having on the trail easement was, we on our site plan review comments on the first round stated, hey, we need this trail easement because the trails master plan shows a trail coming through here. Ed's response on that was, we can't definitively give an easement when we don't know the engineering on the trail and the exact location of the trail. We, the city, don't have the funds to do the engineering on that trail right now, nor do we want to do it until we can get that trail all the way through this area and up into South Park. So the thought was, rather than doing that, we would get into a development agreement that essentially would state, when the city gets to a point where we want to do the engineering on the trail and construct the trail, that we would then ask you for the easement, and the agreement would state that you would give us the easement upon us asking for it.
Okay, is there any reason why you can't take the 30-foot easement where the sewer is?
It could follow that. Technically, yeah, that wouldn't be an issue necessarily, but right now that sewer easement just states that it's a sewer easement, not a trail easement. So we can't then put a trail on top of a sewer easement because the sewer easement doesn't have that legal language in there to allow for the trail.
Is there some way that we could put that in there?
Possibly, but then again, it comes down to engineering, and I don't know exactly where that sewer easement lies. So again, that's a conversation that doesn't need to happen as part of this process. We can do that as part of the, the more administrative side of this process. But right now, we're mainly focusing on the gravel versus paved.
Okay.
You guys have made me come on, and so you can see me now. I just wanted to throw out one of the things that Stacy's talking about too is phasing of the project. We're probably not going to build all the spaces out first phase. So a lot of it will still be, I'll say, meadow or grassy. And then, as she said, as the popularity builds, that's when things start to kick in. And again, too, on the trail, we'll get that worked out. It's just that it needs to be kind of a collaboration between the city and us, and to have that designed right at this time, nobody has the funds to do that. So I think we can get that worked out with the development agreement. The only thing I would mention too, Joe, on bonds is when we have an uncertain, we have no date certain on 17th being paved, it's really hard to have a bond for that going on and on and on. So that's why we'd really prefer to get into a development agreement on that. So that's my 2 bits.
Thanks, Ed. Further ones?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Al?
Yes. Charlie, would it be desirable to reference the development agreement in any action that we take? For example, if we were to have a motion to approve this alternative site plan, would it be desirable to have in there a stipulation that there be, it can be contingent upon the development of a suitable agreement?
Yeah, again, the commission has the ability to put whatever conditions they want on this type of approval. So I think that's appropriate. I guess I wouldn't, and I guess this is at the level of comfort of the commission, but I wouldn't necessarily lock down the method of agreement that we have to say it has to be a development agreement, because there might be a better way to do it once we look into it. I don't know. To me, just thinking on the cost right now, I think a development agreement would be the best way to do this. But without talking to our legal staff and getting a little bit more information on it, I can't be for sure that that would be the correct mechanism to use.
Charlie, how would you word it then if not to directly reference a development agreement? Would you say contingent on a legally binding agreement of enforcement with the city?
Yeah, something. And again, we could probably have this ironed out before the council meeting. So obviously the commission's providing a recommendation to the council, and I think we could then nail that down as part of that. So again, thinking off the top of my head is, the condition would be, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think this is how the commission's going, but the condition would be at the point that the city paves West 17th Street, or excuse me, Avenue, right? At the point that is paved, at that point, the city then would require that this, or the RV park be paved, or the interior roads of the RV park be paved.
I mean, I can speak for myself. That's one of my main kind of hangups here is I just don't want it to be one of those things that hangs out there and never gets done. So as someone that can't make a motion, to be clear, that's my one hang up on this so far.
This is Joe. I've got another question. This is probably geared towards Ed. When that does get paved in the future, if and when that does get paved, obviously going to an impervious product like concrete or asphalt could potentially trigger more stormwater detention requirements, runoff. If we stick to gravel, does that mean that if the developer's agreement references a future paved product, is the detention going to be put in place now for the paved surface in the future? Or how does that work, especially with the way stormwater gets more conservative and changes every year? I would just hate for that to be such a big burden in the future that then makes it cost prohibitive. What's your thoughts on that, Ed?
Well, there's a couple ways to look at it. We are going to be providing some detention. There is a drainage way between phase 1 and phase 2. We've got a fairly good sized pipe that runs through there, but we're going to choke that down and do detention on the east side of the drainage way, or the draw that goes across that. So that will be providing detention that we don't necessarily need to do today. Believe it or not, with the soil types and vegetation that's on there today, the actual runoff coefficient is very similar to gravel. But then you're right, Joe, as we start to pave, then we'll start to be looking to do that detention, or that the detention will start to make more sense. We'll also have room to expand that detention in the future if need be, because of the way the drainage way lands on the property. So I think we have mechanism, no matter whether it's just phase 1 or phase 2, or whether everything gets paved eventually to make that happen. There are 2 rules, or not rules, but thoughts on detention next to creeks. Sometimes we like to actually release before the other water comes down from up above, but that's something we'll work out with staff and their engineers.
Appreciate that, Ed. I just want everyone to make sure that they understand it's not just putting concrete over top of the gravel. There could be other things that trigger because of going to an impervious product. So, and associated cost, and it'll only get more conservative and potentially bigger the longer this goes on if it's not set up and approved for today's standards.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks, guys. Any other questions or discussion here? I would entertain a motion if there's no further discussion at this point then. Or questions about a motion if someone needs some clarity on verbiage.
Mr. Chairman, I'll give it a try. With perhaps with Charlie's help, we can get it right. I would move that the staff recommend alternative 1, approving the alternative method of approval for the site plan pending a mutually agreed upon agreement relating to future paving and trail easement. And somebody feel free to change that if it's not correct. Charlie, does that get us where we want to go?
I don't think you need to discuss the trail easement in that. That's just something that we're handling on the administrative level. You're more than welcome to include it on there, but the action here is mainly on the paving versus gravel.
If you don't need it, take it out then.
That'd be my only comment.
Charlie, does that, so that gets us?
Yeah, and we'll get something, and then what I'll do next month when we come back, or if we have a meeting next month, I think we do. I'll let you guys know exactly how we went about doing that.
And the idea is that the trigger would be the paving of West 17th Ave, correct?
Yes.
Yep, correct.
First, do we have a second?
A second.
Second from Misty. Any further questions or discussion on this motion? All right.
Does there need to be a timeline of once 17th is paved that the RV park will get their project, you know, they have a timeline, so it's not just it being there.
We put that in the development agreement.
All right, Courtney?
Al Ferris,
Yes.
Aaron Freeberg,
Yes.
Megan Needles,
Yes.
Bob Ormsby,
Yes.
Jeremy Freeville,
Yes.
Josh Ray,
Yes.
Misty Soldwich,
Yes.
Joe Butler.
Yes.
All right. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody. Thank you, Ed and Stacy, for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to our next agenda item, consider recommendation on request for approval of a final plat for Quail Meadows Plat 3. Charlie.
Give me 1 second. I'm trying to get through the site plan here.
If I could start on really quickly, I need to recuse myself from this item as I'm marketing this project.
Perfect. Misty's going to recuse herself for this one.
Sorry, this site plan for Crow's Nest is huge. It's taking me a little bit to get through it on this PDF document.
That's twice, Charlie. We've had to wait for you and your computer. You're off tonight, man.
Oh, man. Oh, there we go. And the second it caught up, it went 20 pages ahead.
So this is the final plat for Quail Meadows, plat 3.
Okay, appreciate it. As the commission will recall, last fall, we did approve a preliminary plat for a 50-plus lot residential subdivision. At that time, it was thought that this subdivision would be done in 2 phases. With the current situation that we are in economically, they are now proposing this to be more of a 3-phase subdivision. This first phase, as you can see, submitted with this final plat, being 21 of those 50-plus lots. Comprehensive plan does show this as mixed residential. Pretty much everything else that was on the final plat, that was on the preliminary plat matches the final plat. So this plat does also include a recreational trail easement to connect this subdivision to the Somerset Trail. The trail easement document has not been provided. However, in discussions on this one, we're talking another development agreement due to trails. We are looking into getting a development agreement with the developer on this one. This trail easement is a little bit unique in the fact that we have that existing lift station out there that's part of the existing Quail Meadows subdivision. The city is relocating that lift station so it can service more of an area, including this area. When the existing lift station gets vacated, the city does own a small piece of ground, and there is current access to that existing lift station off the Somerset Trail. So the city's thought and the developer's thought was to utilize that existing access point as now a trail access point for the subdivision, and to be able to utilize then the piece of city property as well to get as much as that trail on the city property as we could. So as part of that, we're kind of negotiating with the developer on exactly how the trail gets paid for, exactly who pays for what and everything, and then the engineering is part of that trail as well. So I would say on this one, we are working towards a development agreement on that, and hopefully we will get that finalized before we take this to the city council. The improvements on this subdivision, for the most part, I think all the underground work has been put in. I'm not sure on paving. I don't believe paving has begun yet on this subdivision, but we're, I believe, getting pretty close to doing that. And then as such, we have not received any maintenance bonds either. So similar to the final plats that we did last month or a couple months ago, our recommendation would be that the commission approves this final plat subject to various conditions. The first condition being that the council does not review this until all improvements have been inspected by city staff and have been recommended for acceptance. That the city council review the recommendation of approval after the recreational trail easement document has been agreed upon. That the city council review the recommendation after approval of the easement documentation regarding the maintenance of the detention basin that's on this site, and that all other easement documents as well as the attachments as required by section 354.11 of the Iowa Code be reviewed by staff prior to recordation of the final plat. So 4 conditions that we put on there, a few more than we had on the last 2 final plats, but as we work through these previous final plat processes, we've noticed that a few things have come up, and that's where the additional conditions are coming in. So if there's any questions on this, I would be happy to answer them.
Anybody have any questions?
Charlie, this is Joe. There's a note on here that Outlot X is going to be owned by the homeowners association and not owned by one of the lots. I mean, how do we ensure that there is a homeowners association already created? I mean, if it in a multi-phased approach, not knowing what that looks like, I could see that Outlot X being kind of an outlier and go unmaintained for a period of time.
Yeah, so that's where that easement document really comes in handy. So the detention easement documents that we typically get into will state that it's the property owner, whoever that may be, in this case, a homeowners association's responsibility to maintain However, then the easement on there gives the city the right, but not the requirement to go in there and maintain it if need be, and then be able to assess any cost of the maintenance back on the property owner. Now that the scenario that you brought up, Joe, would be a little bit unique in the fact that if there is no homeowners association, the city really doesn't have a way to assess anything, because essentially there would be no property owner and it could be back on back taxes at that point. Even if there was a homeowners association, homeowners associations can have sunset clauses, you know, typically 20 years, I believe, is common on that, where 20 years from now, if there's issues, the homeowners association might have dissolved at that point and we don't have any ownership. So the discussion of detention basins is one that we have a lot of here at the city, because the city doesn't have the staff or the ability to take ownership of them and maintain them. So we're doing what we can to rely on private ownership and private maintenance of those, but trying to protect ourselves with agreements that does give the city the ability, if we absolutely need to go in there and maintain those. So there's really not a good answer on that, because again, without the city actually owning them, that's the best way that we can guarantee that those get maintained. But we don't have the capacity to take that on. And we're in the middle of a stormwater utility review, a stormwater master plan right now with the city that's going to review our stormwater utility. There might be some stuff that comes out of that, but you know, you'd be looking at rate increases on the stormwater utility just to pay for it, and that would ultimately be a council decision. So there's some options on there, but ultimately, if there is an issue with the detention basin, those agreements do give the city the ability to go in there and fix them. The problem could be down the road is that if we try to assess it back and get our costs back on that, that could be a little difficult. So
I guess my thought is, with a multi-phased approach and this being phase one, why wouldn't it just still be the property owner's cost and not the homeowners association? Because then if there was an assessment done, you would know who the property owner is, right?
yeah, exactly. And I guess I don't know how they plan on implementing that homeowners association on there. So you know, that could be something that we could have a discussion with, and maybe the developer does keep that detention basin until this is fully built out. But I guess if that's the thought, and if we want to do that, we might want to discuss maybe moving this back a month and having those discussions previously, or at least letting staff have that ability to have those discussions before it goes to council as a condition. So yeah, I see what you're saying. That definitely could be an option.
Well,
If it were the last phase and the homeowner association was already created and it was in place and we knew that there was a 20-year sunset clause on it, we could either get comfortable with it or not. But with phase one, I don't like the idea of it being a homeowner association that we don't know how it's going to be regulated in the future.
Charlie, is there any challenge timing wise that you're aware of if we table this for a month to figure that out, or is it something we can make a recommendation and keep it going to council and you guys can talk, or how does
yeah, whatever the commission's comfortable with on that. I mean, and I don't believe that the applicant's online here at all, so I think that we could have that discussion. I would imagine that they'd be agreeable to something like that. I don't know exactly without talking to them. So again, whatever the commission's comfortable with, if you're comfortable with staff handling that, I think based off what Commissioner Butler's saying there, I've got pretty clear direction on the intention of what you're looking at. So I think we can work towards that resolve. And if anything changes, we can go from there.
Kick it a month.
I'd be comfortable with staff handling it, especially knowing that, I mean, whatever the staff decides is the potential liability the city could take on. So knowing that direction, having that conversation with the applicant prior to council, and then council making that final decision, it's ultimately their ruling on the liability side of things that I'm probably bringing up most right now. So I think it needs to happen prior to it going to council.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
So,
just a thought here, Charlie. Is it, probably have to talk to your attorney, is it possible to put some kind of stipulation in place that would run with all the lots in Plat 3, that all of the lots in Plat 3 and the owners of those lots are responsible for maintenance of that in perpetuity?
Yeah, we'd have,
It'd be some attachment to their title.
yeah, and I don't think we have the ability to require that necessarily. You get, without talking to an attorney, and I don't want to speak off cost here, but to me, you're almost getting just somewhat of a takings thing on land too, because, you know, by doing that, you're affecting value of land at that point, without an actual requirement for that to be the case. But you know, Al, as we get into these code updates, that could definitely be something when we're looking at maintenance of detention basins that we put in there, that somehow that cost is spread over some way, shape, or form on that. So, but I can definitely talk to our attorney and see if that is an option. But I would definitely want to have that conversation with them first before giving you a definitive answer on that.
Yeah, I just kind of, you know, I'm always kind of nervous about these detention basins and who's going to take care of them. And 25 or 30 years from now, you know, I hate to see them all get dumped on the city to be responsible for them, because there are going to be a lot of people that are paying for maintenance of detention basins that have no benefit from them.
Yep.
And just a thought.
I agree with you on that. That's been a concern that we've raised for a while here on those long-term maintenance of detention basins. It's one of those things you know, when you see something that, hey, an HOA is going to take care of it or something like that, sure, that works good in the short term, but long term, these things need to operate in perpetuity through the life of the development. So.
Anybody else?
I'm recused from this item, but just as what you're talking about there, I mean, this isn't an unusual part of development, and we are certainly not the only city that deals with this. Is what needs to be done so that we just have consistent guidelines.
I think that's part of our code updates that are coming,
Yeah.
right, Charlie? We're going to actually, right now, it's a big fuzzy gray area out there, and so we have to have these discussions, Misty, to your point.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably going to be a hot topic in our code update panel that's getting ready to start.
Yep, definitely that too. And then again, as I mentioned, we're doing a stormwater audit right now on our stormwater system, so it's going to be part of that probably as well too, in that discussion of, you know, again, those detention basins are serving a purpose to maintain our stormwater infrastructure. So yeah, how we maintain those it's a great discussion that needs to take place, and one I think that we'll be having both through the code update and through the stormwater utility audit that we're doing.
So that in the future, these things will just be a breeze because it's all clear as a bell.
In the perfect world, yes.
So anybody further here, or do we have, otherwise I'd entertain a motion on this item if someone feels clear on it.
This is Joe. I'll make a motion that the City of Indianola Planning and Zoning Commission recommend the final plat be approved with conditions as noted in the staff report, plus a authorization for staff to engage the applicant for further discussions on ownership and control of Outlot X and recommendation prior to going to council.
You get that, Courtney? You'll go back and watch the tape again.
Yeah, we'll get it.
I got most of it, yeah.
Perfect. We have a first, do we have a second?
I'll second. It's Bob.
Bob Ormsby, second. All right, any further questions from that motion? All right, hearing none. Courtney?
Aaron Freeberg,
Yes.
Becky Needles,
Yes.
Bob Ormsby,
Yes.
Jeremy Freeble,
Sorry, yes.
Josh Rabe,
Yes.
Joe Butler,
Yes.
Al Ferris.
Yes.
All right, moving on. Consider recommendation on request for approval for various amendments, including zoning regulation amendments to Chapter 165 regarding fees.
Thank you for catching that grammatical error. Really quick, and I'm going to be very brief on this one. Each year, as part of our budget process, we always do a review of fees, and we'll adopt a fee resolution where we need to, if we are amending any fees. Part of our budget this year, we looked at various fees related to development, building permits, and all of that. Made quite a few changes, increases in some areas, stayed steady in a few other areas, and that fee resolution was adopted by the city council prior to the adoption of the budget. Soon after that, we realized that a lot of the fees that we had made changes to were actually written into our code of ordinances. So now we have a document, a fee resolution that states a fee is one thing, and the fee then is also spelled out in our ordinance as something separate. So to fix this, we are proposing that taking those fees out of the code of ordinances and replacing it with language that essentially will point anybody reading the code back to that fee schedule that is adopted by the city council. So pretty hopefully straightforward on that one, but you'll see through there was quite a few sections of code that we were taking that out of and replacing it with that language. So if there are any questions on this item, I would be happy to answer them.
Well, if nobody has any questions, I'd happily entertain a motion on this one.
This is Pribble. I will make a motion for the amendment request to be approved as submitted.
Jeremy, do a second?
Joe, second.
Second. Any questions? Courtney?
Becky Needles,
Yes.
Bob Ormsby,
Yes.
Jeremy Preble,
Yes.
Josh Ray,
Yes.
Misty Soldwich,
Yes.
Joe Butler,
Yes.
Al Ferris,
Yes.
Aaron Freeberg.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Now, before we get on to what was agenda item 7A that we moved on down, I will be recusing myself of this one as I represent a party that has a direct interest in this one.
This is Joe Butler. I'm also going to recuse myself on this item.
Misty, it's all you.
Okay. So the new agenda item E, consider recommendation on request from Cheryl Gertz of Indianola Preschool, Inc. for approval of an amendment to Chapter 165 regarding preschools and child care centers. Charlie?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm not sure how up to date the commission is on the Indianola preschool. They have been searching for a new location for their preschool as they are pretty much at capacity at their existing location. We've actually gone back and forth with the preschool on, I want to say, about 3 different sites at this point. They came to the Board of Adjustment last year to get approval for a special exception to be located at where Destiny Bible Church is currently located, and that deal ended up falling through for various reasons. So again, we've been working with them for a while. As part of this process, we did have a conversation with Cheryl, and she expressed some interest in looking at how we allow for preschools within our residential zoning districts. We currently do not allow for them, for example, in R1 zoning districts, and she wanted us to take a look at that and to possibly look at allowing them in those R1 zoning districts, so that could broaden her scope of review when she's looking for locations for the preschool. So what we did, knowing that that's what she was looking at, we kind of did a whole scale review and looked at exactly how we define preschools in our code, see if any changes need to be made with that. Took a look at how state code governs preschools, and then made some recommendations based off those things. So as we mentioned in reviewing the request, we determined a modernization of the regulations were necessary as it pertains to preschool and child care centers. We're proposing to delete the use of private kindergarten and day nurseries from the R2, R3, R4, and R4 zoning districts, and then add 2 new levels of child care services. The first would be a child care home, which would follow the definition of Iowa code. That would, I believe, the child care home states that it is for, its child care home is a person or program providing child care to 5 or fewer children at any one time. And then anything else, so we would then have a second use that would be anything other than that child care home. and then that would be allowed as a special exception in the R1, R2, R3, C2, and C3 zoning districts, and then a principal permitted use in the R4 and C4 zoning district. And then that child care home that I talked about, that would be allowed in the A1 zoning district, the R1 zoning district, the R2, R3, R4, and R6 zoning districts. You'll see it's not included in the R5, as you'll recall. On the R5 zoning district, that's that planned development. So we were comfortable not including on that, because if there was a R5 plan that came forward that proposed a preschool, the commission and the city council would be reviewing it as part of that process. So hopefully that makes sense. If there's any questions on any of these changes, I would be happy to answer them.
So is there anyone here with questions?
Yeah, Misty, this is Al Ferris. Charlie, how would this change impact any of the existing? Would there be an impact on any of the existing facilities?
So the only change would be for that child care home, which is a 5 or fewer, they would be allowed by right in those zoning districts. So they were currently allowed by right in those zoning districts. Really the only change would be on the R1 zoning district, where we had not allowed any of them. And I believe in the A1 zoning district, we also did not allow them. So that would be allowed by right in those 2 zoning districts. And then the ones that would be more than those 5, we would then allow them as special exceptions in all those zoning districts, where I think before we allowed them by right in the R2 and the R3 zoning districts. And then again, we'd be adding it into the R1 zoning district. So the main difference is we're separating 5 or fewer. You can do it inside an existing home as part of a home business, for example. More than 5 allowed by a special exception in all the residential zoning districts.
But an existing business, childcare business, wouldn't have to go to the Board of Adjustment, would they? Would they be quote grandfathered in?
Yes. So existing ones right now to this date would be grandfathered in. It would be any new business.
So from this point on, any business that came from this point on would have to meet those requirements?
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments?
Yeah, I have one other question. What's the standard procedure for a kind of a big change like this for notifying the public that this is occurring? I know that that's a difficult thing, but how do we normally do that? How does the city normally do that?
Yeah, through our normal agenda notification procedures. So we post our agenda in both of our lobbies here. Right now, only one of the lobbies are open, but typically in both of the lobbies. The agenda is published on our website as well. So those are normal procedures on how we notify of these types of changes. So when we get to more specific things like the 2 subdivisions that we had on the agenda tonight, we mail out letters to those surrounding property owners. But on a situation like this, when it does affect the entire city, we don't have the ability to send letters to the entire city notifying them of the change. So we just follow normal procedure on that.
Any other comments or questions?
I would just have one. Is there anything like unique about this as compared to like any other communities? Is there anything that are we doing something different than any other communities are kind of doing with this?
Yeah, so I actually took a look at Pleasant Hill was the one I looked at. We looked at a few other ones, but Pleasant Hill was pretty similar to what I did here. But they're pretty much in the same boat on how that they operate on this. The zoning districts were a little bit different, and the special exception was a little bit different in some of the zoning districts as well. So I just did a blanket. For example, in Pleasant Hill, on some of their more dense or some of their less dense zoning districts, some of their more dense residential zoning districts, they didn't have it as a special exception, but like in their single family, they had it as a special exception, where we're doing them in all of them. So there was a little bit of difference, but I kind of did build this off of some of the ordinances that I saw.
This is Al again. One clarification on R5. Since this would be allowed in R3, wouldn't it also be allowed in R5?
Yep, so it would be allowed in R5. The reason I didn't do it as a special exception though was because the actual plan itself would have to be reviewed by the commission and council.
Thank you. Did you talk to anybody in the childcare business when you working on this?
So Cheryl Gertz, who asked us about this, she was notified and given a copy of the agenda, and I believe that she did review it and didn't have anything, but overall there was nobody else that we talked to on this, no.
Any other questions or comments? So would we entertain a motion? We have limited options here.
Misty, I got to confess, I feel uneasy about this. I don't know, it kind of seems like we're possibly stepping on a landmine here. And I don't feel real comfortable because I don't know anything about it really. And I don't know how many people we're going to impact and what that impact might be. And if some of you that have maybe younger people in your family than me could shed some light, I appreciate it.
Yeah, Al, I'd say like the one thing from my standpoint, I've got, one child and I've had two other ones that go to an in-home daycare. And I'm just thinking how this would affect her. And I kind of like agree with you just in the sense that she would know this, inside out more than I would and would like her opinion on it. To me, what I'm kind of reading through, I don't think there's going to be any issues. But, so I guess I sort of side with you as far as like, I'm not in this, so I don't really know as well. I mean, would there be any issue with, tabling it till next month? Is there any rush to do this?
I don't think there necessarily is on it. And again, according to regarding what you were saying there on the in-home daycare is we're actually opening up more of the city to allow for the in-home daycare, and they are uses that are allowed by right. So we're not decreasing any allowable daycares in that sense. It does become the larger ones, the more commercialized, I would say, daycare centers where, again, we're not taking away the right to have them in any zoning districts. We're just adding a layer of review as a special exception for them in the residential zoning districts.
So with that would mean.
Go ahead, Misty, sorry.
Go ahead. Just that would give planning and zoning the opportunity to get input from nearby residents and also the appropriateness for the location. Is that correct, Charlie?
If we were to remand it back, you're saying?
No, with the special,
special exception. So with the special exception process, it's an application process and it goes to the Board of Adjustment. So
Board of Adjustment.
Similar to what I said on that, what it does is we send out letters to property owners within 200 feet that would be affected by it. So they have the ability then to come to a meeting and voice their opinion, whether for or against it. And it goes through that process. So yeah, that's the process that takes place on that is, again, the neighbors aren't notified of it. Similar to what's done with this meeting, when there's more site-specific items that come up.
Did you say though, like, so in-home would be more, they would be subjected, like there would be capped as far as the amount of children they can have in there, that would affect them, but however, they would be grandfathered in?
Yep, so we're following exactly what the state says on that and that 5 cap.
Okay.
Because the state says that you can have a in-home daycare that I believe doesn't have to be permitted or licensed through the state as long as it's 5 or less. Once you get over that 5, that's when you have to then go through the state process to get approval for the use.
I think I'm fine with it from my standpoint. I don't have any other questions.
Bob, you're on mute.
I had a question regarding it sounded like with special exception, could a larger daycare than 5 get approved in an R1, but with this?
Yeah.
That's what concerns me. I mean, part of it is, yes, I understand it's a given. If you're less than 5, you're not, licensed, it's allowed. But we're actually granting the idea that you could have a larger daycare center in an R1 with this ruling, correct?
But through a review process through the board.
Yeah, with the review process. Yeah.
This is similar to the bed and breakfast discussion that we had last year, and somewhat similar in that sense. So,
I mean, where do you draw the line on, how big the thing can be? I mean, that kind of concerns me.
Yeah.
Because you're just leaving it open-ended for us to make a decision on every one of them, right? I mean, there's no regulations.
There could be, there are some areas of the city that have R1 uses on them, that could facilitate it. I mean, we have, the Redeemer Lutheran Church that we reviewed tonight, large church that's in the middle of an R1 zoning district. That's also right across the street from an elementary school. That's also in the R1 zoning district. So, I mean, we have areas of town where that is, but then again, now if you get into more of a dense residential area, the opinion is going to differ on that, and our staff recommendations even going to differ on that. So the good thing as part of the special exception is from a staff level, similar to what we do here, we can recommend conditions to the Board of Adjustment, and the Board of Adjustment can say, sure, this is good, but we want to limit it to X number of children. But it's just something that you have to review on a case-by-case basis.
Any other comments or questions then with that? I think that was good insight though on the process, because the letter specifically addressed that they have had a difficult time locating appropriate choices in these other districts, and when there are properties available like that.
Yeah.
Can anyone that's involved with Indianola Daycare on the committee shed any light to what kind of facility they want to build?
Joe, I'm waiting for
Sounds
you.
like no.
Bob, this is Becky. From what I know, and I've talked to a few of the teachers that work there, they're out of room and they just want to expand, and they don't have any room at their current facility to expand. This is Indianola preschool too, not daycare. So, yeah, so it's the one, that's behind the Legion and that alleyway there.
Yeah.
But they're wanting to find a different location.
They're wanting to find a location that's more appropriate for people to drop off and pick up kids, and to have room for more bigger classroom sizes.
So I think from my perspective, and this is less specific to this, just overall, it's more of the opportunity as some of these larger properties in town that are R1 zoned that can accommodate redevelopment instead of being a potentially dead property or property that's got a giant building like Redeemer Lutheran, say that church moved on one day, to assess that type of site and have the opportunity to make it a higher and better use. But by doing it this way, there'd be no guarantee that it's a given. So just the opportunity for a institution like that to be a little more creative with still oversight.
The one thing I will add is that, Bob, your comment is 100% valid in that size could definitely impact things, but even if the use does get approved by a special use, they still have to meet the site plan ordinance of green space, setbacks, parking requirements, all that kind of stuff as well. So the size of parcel has to be suitable for the use, and there aren't a lot of those around either. So just their use is one thing, but where it goes is going to be very closely looked at as well, in my opinion.
Just on the other side of it, I imagine it's the concern that Al might have had, is just you know, this type of business requested it, and then just making the consideration of anything technically being able to then fall under that based on request in the future. But I do think that childcare, preschool, those sort of things does have a little different element to it, in that what people are looking for with locations and accessibility and stuff is different than a normal business enterprise. Any other comments or questions? Oh, go ahead.
I would just add one thing, just like one, and we've kind of mentioned this before, like, you know, the code in general, whenever we kind of come across this stuff, that's when this stuff gets looked at. And I think that's kind of what Charlie was saying earlier on. You know, this kind of started with that letter, but then, you know, it's kind of broadened obviously to this whole thing. So I have no problem with like the modernization of our code. I think, but, you know, as we go through it, this is going to be, you know, one of those typical things. And Charlie, like, you know, correct me if I'm wrong in that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And yeah, well, we're going to be looking more whole scale at some of this stuff, to be honest. When we started this process, we had the discussion about possibly even looking and broadening this even more to look at churches and schools and stuff like that. I talked to our consultant who's going to help with the code updates. At that time, I kind of just decided that, hey, we'll do that as part of that process and not really open up this book right now and just more focus on the request at hand. But again, looking at the city as a whole and how it's going to affect the city as a whole.
So any other comments or questions, or are we ready to entertain a motion?
This is Tribble. I'll make a motion to for the amendment request to be approved as submitted.
Second.
All right, so we have a first and second. Are there any other comments or questions before we vote? Courtney?
All right. Al Ferris,
Yes.
Misty Soldwich,
Yes.
Karen Freeberg,
Yes.
Becky Needles,
Yes.
Albert Ormsby,
Yes.
Nikki Friedel.
Yes.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Misty. Moving on to section 8. Are there any comments from commission members?
This is Joe. I appreciate everyone's conversation on this last item, and I guess I love the conversation because it was a lot broader about the general use. I feel like we make a lot of decisions based on site-specific stuff and not what's right for the overall code of the entire community. And so I would hope that more items get brought up like this and we talk about it if it's the right thing for our code across the board, rather than just look at individual sites and make individual rulings on it. So just appreciate everyone's commentary and look forward to more similar commentary as we address all code items.
Joe? Anybody else? Charlie or Courtney, do you guys have anything you want to add tonight?
In the interest of time, the reports that we always have included here on there, if there's any questions on them, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, the only other thing I will add is the council didn't approve the work program. They recognized the commission's approval of the work program that we worked on last month. As part of that process, we have hired a consultant to start the code update process, and we will be having a kickoff meeting with our zoning advisory committee, on which there are a few members of the commission appointed to. So be looking for that. For those of you who might not be on that committee, there's also going to be a lot of stakeholder interviews. So we've identified most everybody that is on the planning commission as either a stakeholder or on that committee. So you'll be involved in it in some way, shape, or form over the next year. And then even more so when we come to adopting the new codes, you'll have a direct involvement with it at that point. So just wanted to update again that work program included a lot of items that revolve around the code updates, and we are working towards those.
Thanks, Charlie. All right, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
This is Bob, I'll make a motion.
Bob, do you have a second?
I'll second it.
Steve's got a second. All right, all those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 I have to take an alternate sign. You guys have a great night. Thank you so much.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Maybe one day.
Yeah.